Good morning. Sorry about that. That was weird. I'm restarting. We'll start the class all over again because my computer connection, all of a sudden it said it was trying to reconnect. So I don't know if I went off or not, but I'm so happy to be here. Good morning to everybody. I hope you're loving and you're enjoying these 10 days to real food and a healthier you. I hope you're loving the experience of tasting the difference between conventionally raised food and naturally raised food. I hope you're loving who went out and got pasture raised eggs. Who's loving the taste of food with butter on it? Who's loving who went out and got ferments this weekend? That's what I want to know. I want you to give me some love. Let me know that you're there. Give me some love. Let me know that you're loving the class. Let me know how you're doing. Who went out and who either went out this weekend and made some real natural fermented food, or went to the store and purchased some, or the farmer's market and purchased some, or ordered some from Amazon. Who out there is trying step number 5 of 10 days to real food? I really want to know. I really want to hear how you guys are doing. So today's class is all about blood sugar regulation. Let me pull up my notes here. We're going to be talking about blood sugar regulation. We're going to be talking about sugar consumption. We're going to be talking about how to switch from unhealthy sugar to healthy forms of glucose for the body. Okay? So I'm super excited to be here. Sorry again for the glitch. I hopefully everybody was able to come back on and see and watch the class today. So the body likes to maintain balance. We've talked about that. But I'm going to hold off on that subject for just a minute because I want to remind you what I've been telling you all week long. You can have the very best digestion in the world. And if you're not feeding your body nutrient-dense whole food, you're going to be malnourished. Everybody understands the concept of garbage in, garbage out when it comes to a computer, but yet we expect somehow to put garbage into our bodies and have our bodies function normally and healthily to be normal, to be healthy. And that just isn't possible because our body needs the nutrients. The function of digestion is to take the food that we eat and break it down into molecules that are so small that they can be absorbed into the cell. Now think about that. The function of digestion is to take the food that we eat and break it down into molecules. Hi, Melanie. Hope you didn't have problems with the other feeds. For some reason, my computer stopped working, or at least the wireless internet did. Anyway, so the function of digestion is to take the food that we eat and break it down into molecules so small that it can be absorbed by the cell, okay? Break it down into molecules so small that it can be absorbed into the cell. Now, in order for the cell to be nourished, those molecules that are being broken down have to be nutrient dense. There has to be nutrients in the molecules for the cells to use them and be healthy and be healed, okay? So again, you can have the best digestion in the world, but if you're not eating nutrient dense food, you're going to be malnourished, okay? So today's topic is going to be blood sugar regulation. We're going to be talking about healthy blood sugars. We're going to be talking about sugar and the difference between a healthy glucose or a healthy form of glucose and an unhealthy one. Okay, and I intentionally waited until after Valentine's Day for this topic because I didn't want to be cruel, because Valentine's Day is all about, you know, the chocolates and the sweets and stuff. But hopefully today you're ready to hear and learn all about healthy blood sugar regulation, okay? So the body does a really good job of maintaining balance. We've talked about that before. It likes to maintain a healthy glucose level in the blood, or healthy blood sugar levels of between 80 and 100 milligrams per deciliter, okay? So when you first wake up in the morning, you're on the lower end, right? And you eat a good, healthy breakfast. You have some pasture-raised eggs, and you have some bacon from a pasture-raised pig that's been naturally cured, right? And you have some full-fat, healthy raw milk. And that causes the blood levels or the blood glucose levels to rise slightly closer to that 100 mark, right? Well, when the blood glucose level rises to about that 100 mark, or maybe even a little bit lower, it signals the pancreas to release insulin. Now, the function of insulin is to take the glucose to the cell, knock on the door, and allow that cell to accept the glucose in. And then the body uses glucose and oxygen and some minerals to create energy for us, right? And then it also can store some of that glucose for later use. And then if there's too much glucose, then it also stores some in the liver, okay? Then as the glucose level, because the glucose is being taken up by the cells, the glucose level starts to drop in the blood, which is what we want. We want this normal range of 80 to 100, right? Well, as the glucose level gets closer to 80, the body signals the pancreas to release glucagon. And glucagon then tells the body to take that stored glucose and use it for energy. Put it back in the blood so that the cells can use it. And that's how we maintain this healthy balance of 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliter of glucose in the blood. That's what the body is looking for. That's the balance that the body wants. That's what's normal, okay? Well, the problem that we're having nowadays is that the amount of sugar that we're taking in is so much more than what the body needs. You know, in 1821, we consumed about 10 pounds of sugar per person per year, okay? Now, what we have, though, is in the 1970s, when we began having that push for low-fat diet, all these food manufacturers that were making food began taking fat out. And when they took fat out, well, we know that fat makes things taste better. So when they took the fat out, they had to put sugar in. They had to put something in to make it taste better, and something inexpensive. Sugar that is fairly inexpensive, especially since we've got beet sugar, which is typically genetically modified, right? So sugar consumption began to raise. And in 2005, it raised all the way up to 199 pounds, almost 200 pounds of sugar per person per year. So we went from 10 pounds per person per year in 1821 to 199 pounds per person per year in 2005. Today, depending on what you read, it's between 180 and 196 pounds, so it's dropped a little bit, but still 180 to 196 pounds of sugar per person per year. So that's about a cup of sugar a day that we're consuming, about a cup of sugar a day. And the challenge is that when we eat a lot of packaged foods, we may not even realize, unless we're looking at the labels and the grams of sugar, we may not even realize how much sugar is really in that. And the reason for that is because food manufacturers aren't required on the ingredients list to say sugar, as long as they identify the specific types of sugar. So for example, they could say that their product contains sucrose and glucose and dextrose and malt syrup and brown sugar. They could list all those different types of sugar and not even list sugar. Now, most people recognize that you want to look at the first three ingredients to see what the primary things are, right? Well, because they can break it up into all those different types of sugar, sugar may be the number one thing in that food, and we wouldn't realize it because it's listing it as 10 different sources of sugar down below. So it could actually list wheat as number one, and then list 5 to 10 different types of sugar in the rest of the ingredients, and we wouldn't realize that sugar was actually the number one thing in the ingredients list, okay? Now, there are over 100 different names for sugar, which makes it difficult to even identify the sugar in there, okay, in whatever we're eating. And new names are being invented and created all the time. Now, the other challenge that we have when we're looking at the list of ingredients is that food manufacturers are not required to notify you on the package or to list on the package when a product contains an artificial sweetener. And the challenge with that is that artificial sweeteners can be up to 1,200 times sweeter than real sugar. And so what that causes is that creates a situation in which our taste buds become used to this super sweet taste. And so real foods like bell peppers may not taste sweet. I mean, they're called sweet peppers, but if you're used to that highly sweetened taste, sweet peppers don't taste sweet. Or even the Granny Smith apples don't taste sweet because we're so used to this sweet, overly sweet taste in our foods, okay? And we talked about how there's all these different names for sugar. And when you're looking on the list, on the list of ingredients, if it doesn't say sugar, you may not realize how much sugar is actually in there. It could say malt something. It could say sugar. It could say nectar, or it could say some type of sugar, you know, blank sugar. It could say blank syrup, or it could say corn syrup, or it could say, you know, some kind of juice, or it could say anything ending in OSE or anything ending in TOL. Those are all names for sugar. So there can be a whole bunch of sugar in that packaged food, and you wouldn't even realize it necessarily by looking at the ingredients list unless you knew that all the hidden names for sugar. And I'm going to put a list of some of the known ones in the comments after we're done. But you need to realize that new names are being invented all the time, and new artificial sweeteners are being invented all the time. One of the worst ones that you're going to find on an ingredients list is high fructose corn syrup, which is also known as corn sugar, okay? But corn sugar is one of those hidden names for high fructose corn syrup because high fructose corn syrup is finally being recognized for the danger that it is, okay? Now, why do food manufacturers use high fructose corn syrup instead of other natural sweeteners? Well, first of all, it's cheaper and it's also sweeter. So it costs less money, they can use less, except that with these heightened tastes for exaggerated sweetness, you know, that's the amount of high fructose corn syrup is being raised. And the other danger is that it's probably made from genetically modified corn. I mean, over 90% of the corn grown in the United States is genetically modified. And high fructose corn syrup is more quickly absorbed by the body, so that's a big danger. But they're also discovering that high fructose corn syrup affects our memory, and it slows down our learning. And over time, it can actually damage the brain. High fructose corn syrup is really something that you want to avoid. And yet, if you look on the ingredients list, it's going to be found in a lot of prepackaged foods, okay? So what effect does all of this sugar, this inundation of sugar, happen on the body? Remember, we went from 10 pounds of sugar per person per year to a day anywhere, depending on the study that you read, between 180 and 196 pounds of sugar per person per year, or about a cup of sugar a day. So what effect does that have on the body that's trying really hard to maintain this balance of between 80 and 100 milligrams per deciliter? So I told you how when we eat food, the glucose level in our body or in our blood rises, and when it gets up to about that 100 mark, the pancreas releases insulin, right? Well, when it gets up over that 100 mark, okay, the body releases more insulin because it wants to drive it back down into that 80 to 100 mark, right? Well, when it gets so much higher than the 100, it releases more insulin, and if it still doesn't bring it down to that mark, then the pancreas releases another hormone called glucagon, which tells the liver to release the stored glucose, right? And then if that's not enough, the body tells the adrenals to release cortisol, which then tells the liver to create glucose from amino acids, okay? Then because we've got all of this glucose, or glucagon, and we've got the cortisol, and we've got the insulin floating around, our blood sugar levels drop. So think, first you've got the sugar high, then you've got the sugar crash, right? So we end up having this out of balance range. And there comes a point when the cells become insulin resistant because they can't take, remember the goal of insulin and the goal of all of the cortisol is to drop the levels of the glucose. And it does that by either telling us to create energy, so it takes that all to the cell and says, here, take this cell, store it if you have to, use the energy. And eventually the cells are like, I don't have any more room. There's no more room at the end. And so the cells actually stop listening to the insulin. They stop listening because they have no more room, right? And then because there's still all this glucose floating around in the blood, the cells they're just surrounded by glucose, and they get this sticky coating, and which is called glycination. They get the sticky coating of glucose. They get glycinated. And so that even if they wanted to accept the insulin, now they can't, because it's binding their receptor sites and making it difficult to function properly. Not only does it make it difficult to bring the glucose in, and it makes it difficult to release the toxins, right? This leads to hypoglycemia. It leads to type 2, well, it leads to insulin resistance, and then it eventually leads to type 2 diabetes. All because we've got these huge spikes of glucose, and then we've got the drops, which body says, okay, well, now we really need, now we need more. So, it's going to want to take all the stored ones out. And so it really affects your pancreas, it affects your liver, it affects your adrenals, and it leads to problems with all of those organs. So let's talk about the difference between natural sugar, unrefined sugar, and refined sugar. Well, natural sugars are going to be the sugars that you find in food, okay? Now, there are simple carbohydrates and there are complex carbohydrates. The simple sugars are what you get in fruits and in some vegetables, right? The complex ones are the ones you get in other vegetables and in grains, okay? And those are the ones that bring with them lots of other nutrients and fiber, which helps slow down the absorption into the bloodstream, right? Unrefined, they're still processed because they have to do some kind of processing in order to isolate the sugar. For example, they do some processing to isolate sugar from sugar cane, okay? Or you from the molasses, you turn molasses from the cane as well. Or you take sap and you make maple syrup, or there might be some kind of processing to get raw honey from the hive, okay? But even that unrefined doesn't have the fiber, but it does still have some minerals in there, okay? So there is a little bit of nutrient value in unrefined sugar, and some unrefined sugars like the raw honey and maple syrup is actually a prebiotic, and we talked last week about the importance of probiotics with our gut health, right? Well, in our whole body health. Well, prebiotics, if you remember, are foods that feed the probiotics, and so maple syrup and raw honey are actually prebiotics, but it has to be the real maple syrup, and it has to be raw honey, not the kind that you boil, because when you boil it, you denature it, okay? And then, of course, we have the refined sugars, which have all the minerals stripped. Sometimes they might be bleached because, of course, white sugar is better than the tan sugar, right? And so there really is a difference between a natural sugar and either an unrefined or refined, and there's a slight difference between the unrefined and the refined. Refined really has no nutritional value whatsoever. It's just a source of pure energy, pure glucose. I don't even like to use the word energy because we're so inundated with it that it's lost really, and it's still a form of energy, but it's really become more of a toxin because we've got so much in our body, in our blood. So how do you know if you're hypoglycemic, if you're in that out of balance range? Okay, well, some of the symptoms you might experience are things like fatigue. You might have some memory issues, right? There might be infertility. Infertility is actually a symptom of hypoglycemia. Depression is another one. An inability to sleep. Maybe you have a slow metabolism, and so you kind of have a little bit of weight issue. Maybe you crave sweets, or you get irritable if you miss a meal, or lightheaded if you miss a meal. Maybe you need to have caffeine for a boost. You need to have your afternoon coffee, or you need to have your afternoon soda pop or whatever. That's all an indication. If you have to have that, that's an indication that you're hypoglycemic and that you're going through that dysregulation, blood sugar dysregulation, okay? You might kind of get jittery or shaky, and you might even get blurred vision because it really does affect the blood vessels as well, okay? And that's hypoglycemia. Well, the next step from that is insulin resistance before you get to type 2 diabetes. How do you know if you're insulin resistant? Well, of course, some of the same symptoms of hypoglycemia, you know, the fatigue and the memory loss and infertility and depression. Those are some of the same ones. But maybe you can't lose weight, or maybe your joints have begun to ache, or maybe you have thyroid issues, or you know what, even premature aging is an indication. If you're starting to get wrinkles and you're still thinking, I'm too young to have wrinkles, right? Or you're getting age spots or something. If you're tired after you eat, or if you crave sweets, or here's a really good one. If after you're done eating, you're thinking, I just need a little dessert and then I'm good, okay? That's an indication that you're becoming insulin resistant. Now, two other things that's really manifesting as a result of insulin dependence or insulin resistance is that there's an increase of male hormones in women, so women have more facial hair, and there's an increase of female hormones in men, so men become more effeminate when they become insulin resistant, okay? So your challenge for this week, I hope you understand the dangers of too much sugar in the body, right? The dangers in your blood sugar levels, the dangers in how you feel, in memory, in fertility, in hormones, all of that. Okay, so your challenge for today is to have your first source of blood glucose, your first source of glucose be from natural sources, okay? Come from your food, whether it's fruit, vegetables, complex carbohydrates like in whole grains like brown rice, right, and whole wheat. That's your first source. Your second source will come from unrefined, like raw honey and maple syrup, but you want to limit the amount of sugar consumption per day. If you're looking at something on a package and you're looking for sugar, you want 5 grams or less, okay? And when you're looking at the ingredients, you want to be able to recognize the ingredients as food. You don't want to have high fructose corn syrup at all, okay? And for some of you, that's going to be a challenge if you are dependent on soda pop, because soda pop is made with high fructose corn syrup, again, because it's sweeter and because it's cheaper. But we mentioned earlier about all the damaging effects it has on the body, okay? So your challenge is to get your energy, okay? Because remember that the body takes glucose, combines it with oxygen and minerals to create ATP, right? Get your energy from natural sugars, from fruits and vegetables, and from whole grains, okay? Because the body takes grains and converts it into glucose. Now, there are some vegetables that convert more quickly into glucose, and or metabolize more quickly into glucose, and there are some fruits as well that metabolize more quickly into glucose. So when you're eating your vegetables, especially the potatoes and the sweet potatoes that convert really quickly and into glucose, make sure you're putting the butter on there, because butter is going to slow that absorption down, right? If you're eating fruits, try to get some kind of protein or fat, maybe cheese, dairy, you know, with your apple and cheese, with your fruit to help moderate that absorption, okay? If you do have some type of refined, I don't want to say refined, not natural, although that's not right either. If you do have other kinds of sugar, make sure it's an unrefined sugar like raw honey or raw maple syrup, okay? Now, this can be a really big challenge for a lot of people, because if you're dependent upon glucose and you get those spikes and those drops, right? You get the sugar high and you get the sugar crash. When you start to cut back on your sugar, you can actually get like a headache, or you can get really cranky or irritable, okay? Those same symptoms that indicate that you're hypoglycemic or that you're insulin resistant, you can start to get some of those. But after about a week, you start to feel better, and you start to feel much better. So I teach this class called the Restart Program. That's a 5-week class. And in that 5-week class, we go more in depth into the nutrition and the effects of nutrition on the body. We go more in depth into that. But during those 5 weeks, we also, as a group, go through a 3-week sugar detox. And so during that first week, you kind of get introduced to it. What are some things that you want to avoid, that kind of stuff. And what's really interesting is that for my students that go through the course with me, some of the things that they've reported is an increase in their vision. Their vision has improved. And we talked about how sugar can affect, high glucose levels can affect blood vessels, and especially the smaller ones into our eyes, right? So people on the Restart program will have reported increased or improved vision. They've talked to me about how there was their joints don't ache anymore, right? There was one student who said, I used to go up and down the stairs to do laundry, and I just figured that my knees were going to hurt because I'm getting old. At the end of the Restart program, her joints did not ache anymore. I had one student who could not close her hands or open them completely. Her hands were stuck like this because it was too painful. She just couldn't open her hands. She couldn't even write. It was difficult to write because she couldn't grasp a pen or a pencil. At the end of the 5-week class and the end of this 3-week sugar detox, she had full range of motion. I have had so many wonderful experiences with the Restart program and that 3-week sugar detox. So later on this week, I'm going to announce a special for the people in my group who want to join me for the Restart program, because I'm going to be teaching that class again later on at the end of this month, okay? And I want to give you a chance to experience for yourself how it feels to go off sugar, okay? But also how it feels to bring those blood sugar levels back into balance. Okay, we're going to start today, though, in this challenge, the 10 days to real food and a healthier you challenge. We're going to start today, and I'm going to challenge you to start reducing the amount of sugar that you consume. I'm going to challenge you to eliminate high fructose corn syrup. You can do it. I know you can. You can give up your soda, okay? You can really do that. And I'm going to challenge you that you get the glucose that your body needs. Your first source is going to be from real food. You're going to be having fruits and vegetables and whole grains, not the refined grains. And we haven't really talked about that yet, but we will, okay? And your second source is going to be from unrefined raw honey and raw maple syrup, all natural maple syrup. That is your challenge for today. Okay, start working on getting rid of the refined white sugar. Start working on getting rid of those packages that have ingredients that you don't understand that might have 10 different kinds of sugar. And I'm going to list the different names for sugar in the bottom or in the comments here so that you have that list. But start looking at, if you do have a prepackaged food, you want 5 grams of sugar or less. And 5 grams is about a teaspoon of sugar in a serving, okay? So if you're looking at yogurt and it's got more than 4 to 5 grams, I think it's like 4.5, but if it's got more than 5 grams of sugar in that yogurt, that cup of yogurt has a teaspoon of sugar in it or more, okay? If you're looking at one of those granola bars and it's got more than 4 to 5 grams of sugar, it's got over a teaspoon of sugar in it, okay? And that's what we want to start eliminating. We want to start eliminating the unnatural sugars. We want to focus on natural sugars that come from our food. And then if we do have to add a sweetener, it's going to be an unrefined sweetener like raw honey or maple syrup. Okay, that is our challenge for today. I know that you can do it, but if you need help, I'm here. And I'm happy, and I'd love to have you join me in the Restart program. I'll give you more details about that later this week. But today I just want to have you start focusing on paying attention to how much sugar there is in what you're eating, and paying attention to the sources of fuel for your body, and paying attention to how you're feeling when you're eating sugar that you get from real food as opposed to the highly sweetened sugar from artificial sweeteners, okay? Which brings up no artificial sweeteners. It's natural sugar. You don't want artificial sweeteners, okay? So I'm really excited to hear how you guys do with this challenge tomorrow. I'd love to have you put in the comments. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're scared, because when you get to the topic of sugar, it can be scary to eliminate sugar, right? Because it's everywhere. But it's possible. It is so possible, and you will be so surprised and so thrilled at how good you feel when you give up that when you give up that refined white sugar, and you give up that high fructose corn syrup. And I didn't even talk about the damaging effects of artificial sweeteners. Didn't even talk about that, but we know that it's horrible. We know that aspartame is not good. We know that those artificial sweeteners are just not good for the body. And I can put some information on that in the comments too, on just the dangers of artificial sweeteners. But I'm so excited to hear how you guys do with today's challenge. Like I said, I intentionally waited until after Valentine's Day to give you the sugar challenge, but that's your challenge. Start getting your fuel from real food. And if you have to add a little bit of sweetener to something, maybe you're cooking, you're baking something, use raw honey or real maple syrup. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to hear. This one is probably one of the hardest, but it's also one of the most important steps to real food and a healthier you that you are going to try and do. And I don't even want to say try. You're going to do it. I know you're going to be successful, and I can't wait to hear about your success. So thank you very much. I love seeing you guys every day. I'm so excited to see you guys join me. And I'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock with the next step number, what are we going to be on step 7? Yes. So I will see you tomorrow, and thank you very much for joining me. Bye-bye.